All right, guys. So that's the UNO Synth, and I guess my take on the UNO Synth itself. So if you guys don't know me, there's a giant picture of my face. I think it's a pretty good picture, but it is a big picture. So if you don't know me, I'm Noir Blanc Vie, also actually known in real life as Steven. I'm a keyboardist, but I'm also a YouTuber, so if you guys have been on YouTube over the past few years, you've probably seen some of my videos, and if not, you can enrich your lives by watching them, I guess. So, brief story about the UNO Synth and how I kind of came to be interested in the UNO Synth itself. Back in 2018, the UNO Synth had kind of been making the rounds, and I had seen a lot of videos about the UNO Synth. And personally, me not being a huge person who likes doing synths on the go, I was kind of passing it over. But I finally decided to do it for my yearly Halloween episode. And when I got the UNO Synth in my hand, it really became something that I felt that I could play with when I was just not at home, but when I was on the go. So actually on the way here today, I took the train from Los Angeles down here to Anaheim, and I had a lot of fun just messing with it, putting my headphones on, and having people think that they had no idea what I was doing, but I was actually making music, and a couple of people asked, like, what is that? And I just said, oh, it's an instrument. You can play it. And you know, the battery options and everything are great. I think that just having a piece of equipment that's this flexible on the go is something that really kind of helps your creativity as you're kind of going from here and there. So I had a couple of talking points that I wanted to bring up about the synth. I'm also going to show some pictures of the UNO Synth itself. First of all, I wanted to talk about the form factor. Obviously, I can't move this one, but I can move this one here. So the form factor of the UNO Synth is honestly something that is actually a lot more, it's a lot easier when you're touching one to understand like how light and easy it is to bring around with you everywhere you go. I've actually had mine since about August, and I found that there's never a time that I can't bring it with me. It's never too much or it's never too big. It's really thin, and it takes 4 AA batteries. They last a long time. I think that when you think about bringing around an analog synth, that always seems like something more than what it actually is in this case. It's so small and it's so thin and it's incredibly light compared to what I'm using over here, my Tempest. This is about, I feel like it's 5 or 6 times lighter. And you feel like you have the same amount of raw analog synthesis power as you would in this really heavy, giant, expensive piece. And for the UNO, the price for what you get is just amazing for the sound quality. As well, I want to talk about the playability. Now, I think some people will think you can't really get a lot out of something this small, but you know, practice is everything, honestly, in life when I think about being a keyboardist, right? So when I had to learn how to play a regular keyboard, I had to practice at it to get good. When you think about playing something that's just a flat tactile surface like this, it's honestly, it's a lot better than you would think in your mind about when you're doing something on something purely flat. So when I use the UNO, honestly, sometimes I just play scales, and I really enjoy just the ability to have something where you can kind of practice on an instrument that you're going to use on the go all the time. As well, you have tons of knobs and tons of buttons to give you lots of different feedback when you're using the synth, and that can't be understated, honestly. Something I think that, as someone who does synthesis, presets are not always a good word. Some people think that presets are a bad word, but the presets within the UNO Synth are actually really, really useful. I'm going to scroll through a couple here, and I'm going to play some just because I find that a preset is actually the starting point for understanding like how a synthesis is going to work for you and if the capabilities are going to be good. So this is something just this is very plain Jane, but you can see opening the filter, closing the filter. It's just really smooth. The character of the filters is, even when you crank the resonance, I feel like it screams in the right way. You can crank up the drive. You can get real dirty. But I don't feel like you ever really use fidelity with the synth. And this, mind you, again, is a piece of equipment that costs under $200. This is really good for those of us who, I don't know if I call us analog purists, but people who really love the sound quality. To get that for the price is just amazing, and the portability. You're just using AA batteries. I was using AA batteries today. It's plugged in now, but I was using AA batteries all day on the train, and no problem. So I want to talk about the performance controls. You have 5 performance controls that are really easy to access right on the front of the synth. I'm going to go over to the next slide here. Let's go here. All right, so you've got dive, scoop, you've got your vibrato, you've got your wah, and you've got your tremolo. They all do different things. You can do pitch bends with the dive and the scoop, and you can do your vibrato, tremolo, and your wah. I want to go through a couple of those because I think in terms of when you're using performance-wise, with the size of the synth, I have big hands, but even someone who has smaller hands can get from, say, the wah to where you would change the rate of the wah and where it's kind of opening and closing the filter. To also, you can actually play a key at the same time. So I'm just playing a key, and I want to do a wah. I just move my hand up to the wah, right there. And I can also change the rate of the wah. And it's really easy because even with someone with smaller hands, you can have a lot of fun with just playing something very simple, but using the performance controls to enhance whatever that sound is, honestly. It also has tremolo. You have your vibrato as well. And those are all syncable with the clock as well if you're playing a sequence. And you can actually use them all basically standing free, so they can be any rate you would like them to be. I also wanted to talk about the filter a little bit more. I think when people think about an analog synth, the filter is probably the most important part to people. They always think about the sound of the filter and the character of the filter. When you think about, say, a Moog synthesizer, what people talk about is the filter. And I think when me as a person who's thinking about a synthesizer, I'm always kind of wary about a filter on something that's very cheap. You never know how it's going to actually sound. But with the drive controls and the resonance, I mean, you can hear how smooth it opens up. Now, I don't know if everyone in here knows a ton about synths and how filters sound when they're not good, but this is the opposite of what it sounds like when it's not good. This is a very pleasing sounding filter. And a lot of times a synth gives itself away when you play the filter with the resonance open very wide. But it never breaks up. And that's really what I was surprised about when I had my hands on the UNO. It was so surprising how it stayed together and intact, even when you're opening the filter really, really wide. And I think just for the price and being able to have just that much power in a synth is just really, really, I don't know. I think it's really important for me. I want to talk about the sequencer and the arpeggiator. I didn't do it while I was doing the performance, but it's as easy as doing it on the fly. I'm just going to play something real quick here. And honestly, using a sequencer is as easy as pressing the sequence button with the SEQ and then pressing the record button, and I can just, in real time, play in any sort of a sequence I'd like. So I'll just play something in. It's really easy to just take an existing sequence, take it away, and put in a new sequence. I can just put something else in there. I mean, the playability is just right there in your hands, and I think that that's really something that's important about a synth, when you can just get your hands dirty right away. Sometimes, as I did just now, you get something going and you kind of lose yourself, and I think that's really, really the fun part about the UNO when I play the UNO. It's not necessarily about what you're wanting to do, but the simplicity in like a really good user iPhone, you know, like if you're using an iPhone and it's just like, oh, I'm in there and it's so easy to use. That's kind of how the UNO works. When you don't even think it's working like that. It's just so intuitive. Of course, you have the arpeggiator as well, which is just as simple. You could just press the ARP button. You can play however many notes. I'm going to make this. It's just really very much a friendly instrument that you can use anywhere. Lastly, I just want to talk about the matrix on the left-hand side. It's really easy to get from where you are to where you want to go with the matrix on the left-hand side. It looks sort of intimidating at first glance, but when you kind of understand how the matrix works, you really understand that you have everything right under 4 buttons and 4 knobs. And I think that when you're going through and performing, it's really important to kind of have that kind of at a moment's notice. And I feel like with the UNO, you have all of that under your fingertips. Let's go to the next one. You also have a editor for the Mac and the PC, which gives you a lot more of the controls that you'd find under the matrix area within the actual user interface on your app. It works on Android, it works on your iOS. I found it very useful for making more complex patches, and I think that just the interface of the synth itself, it's great on its own, but with the editor, it really opens up a whole other world for you guys. So, I think that's it for me, but if anybody wants to ask a question or anything, you can, I guess, now. All right, guys. Well, appreciate your time. I'm Noir, Blanc Vie, and thank you, guys.